All right, everyone, welcome to our Land Use Committee meeting of Monday, January 29th, 2018. Our clerk is Victor Young, and from SFGov TV, I'd like to thank Jim Smith and Maya Hernandez. I guess, as everyone was busy plotting to become the next mayor of San Francisco, I was secretly plotting to become our next chair of the Land Use Committee. So I'm Supervisor Katie Tang, your new Land Use Committee chair. We are joined by new member, Supervisor Asha Safai, and we have our veteran Land Use Committee member, Supervisor Aaron Peskin.
Vice chair for life.
All right, Mr. Clerk, do you have any announcements?
Yes, please silence all. Please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the February 6, 2018 Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
All right, thank you. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Item number 1, ordinance amending the planning code to establish the Gary Masonic Special Use District in the area generally bounded by Gary Boulevard to the south, Masonic Avenue to the east, and Assessor's Parcels Block number 1071, lots numbers 1 and 4 to the north and west, respectively.
Thank you. And I believe that Supervisor Safai has asked to, assume sponsorship of this item. Supervisor Safai.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Kanishka from Mark Farrell's office. To come just say a few words, and then we're going to talk about continuing this item.
Kanishka Karnaratna on behalf of former Supervisor Mark Farrell. Thank you for hearing this item today. We have been working with the neighborhood and the sponsors of this project for over 2 years, and we're looking forward to having it heard today. But we do need to have some amendments drafted to accept the Planning Commission's recommendations. Unfortunately, those aren't ready today, so respectfully ask for a continuance to next week's land use hearing.
Great, thank you. And Deputy City Attorney Givner, should we just send you the language, or would you like us to read into the record what we're asking for today?
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, it's really up to you. We're working with your office and the mayor's office on these amendments for next week. You can discuss them today. You don't have to, and we will have something prepared for you next week to discuss and vote on.
Okay. Let me look one quick thing.
Would you like me to go to public comment first?
Yes, why don't we do that?
All right.
Yeah.
Why don't we go to public comment on item 1? Any members of the public who wish to speak? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed.
Great, thank you. So I'm just gonna read what we'd like, and then we can send it over to you. So we would essentially ask for increase to the required inclusionary housing requirement from 18 to 23%, and broken down as follows: 10% at 55% AMI, 4% at 80% AMI, 4% at 110% AMI, and 5% at 120% AMI. And then there's one last thing that I think we can talk about, or that can be sent over, regarding parking spaces. I think we were talking about 4 of the 16 off-street parking spaces be reserved for car share, as long as car share service provider is able to provide service in those spaces. So we'll send you over the exact language, but the AMIs, this is something that's been negotiated over the last number of months with the community and organized labor groups and the supervisor's office and staff, and so this is the consensus agreement. So we'll have that language for next week. So when we do make the amendment next week, it will be made for the first time, and then we have to vote on it again, or will we be introducing it for the first time in that form, just so we get an idea of the timing?
You can vote on those amendments next week. The amendments will trigger a 1-week continuance, so this item would be at land use next week, and then the following week as well.
Okay, thank you. So I have nothing else, Chair.
All right, so I think there's a motion to continue then,
Yes.
this item. Okay.
Yes. Motion to continue this item.
All right, we'll do that without objection. Item 2, please.
That matter will be continued 1 week to February the 5th, is my understanding.
Next Monday.
Yes, February 5th.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 2, please.
Next on the agenda, item number 2. Ordinance amending the planning code to amend the inclusionary housing ordinance to remove the requirement that on-site and off-site inclusionary units within a new development be ownership units rather than rental units, or alternately, that the project sponsor submit a contract demonstrating that the proposed on-site or off-site units are exempt from the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act.
Thank you. Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you, Chair Tang and Supervisor Safai. Last year, the board passed a historic update to our inclusionary affordable housing program, as we all know, and Supervisor Safai, President Breed, and Supervisor Kim and I worked on that, and that set the highest affordable housing requirements in the country, including new levels for middle-income housing. That local victory was followed in the last legislative session in Sacramento by the passage of Assembly Bill 1505, also known as the Palmer Fix, which restores the city's ability to require on-site and off-site inclusionary affordable housing in rental housing projects without the need for the development to fit into an exception to Costa-Hawkins and requiring a Costa-Hawkins agreement. AB 1505 has been a long time in the making. I actually want to thank our Assembly and Senate delegation for supporting Assembly Member Bloom's, not only in this instance, but also in another critical housing measure, AB 1506. But AB 1505 rectified the loophole that has bound San Francisco to a fee-first requirement, which has made the creation of on-site inclusionary, or for that matter, off-site inclusionary housing a secondary option, hindering what I think is all our policy goal, which is to encourage and incent as much on-site affordable housing in new developments as possible. With the passage of that bill, we now have the ability to condition development approval on the amount of affordable rental housing being built on site, as long as developers are provided with additional options for complying with these affordable housing requirements, like paying an in lieu fee or building the affordable housing off-site. Given that AB 1505 went into effect 29 days ago on the 1st of this year, I've introduced this legislation before you today, which merely conforms our local inclusionary program with these new Palmer Fix provisions. This went before the Planning Commission and Mr. Starr's memorandum, which indicates that it was unanimously approved, albeit I did catch one typo where you refer to it as 1515 instead of 1505. Just want to let you know I read your memo, Aaron. And we asked the Commission also to consider minor technical amendments, specifically to conform Section 124. I would also like to make a motion to replace the reference to the redevelopment agency in Section 406 to OCII and Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, which will be subsidizing 100% affordable housing in the future. The Planning Commission recommended approval, and I'd like to make the following amendment as a result. On page 13, Section 124, Sub 1, strike, if any designated unit will be rental units, the project sponsor must follow the procedures in Section 415.5, Sub G, Sub 2, as provided in that subsection. The planning director or the director of MOHCD may execute such an agreement under the terms specified in Section 415 G2 on lines 16 through 19. And then in Section 406, 1B, and I've just put the language before you, is where the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing and the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure, commonly referred to as OCII, or any future successor agency to those listed herein. So subject to public comment, I would like to make those motions and help move our on-site, off-site, affordable housing and rental property policy forward.
Any other comments?
I'll ask my
Supervisor.
questions. No, I'll ask my questions after.
Okay. All right. So let's open up item 2 to public comment, unless Planning Department staff would like to speak first.
Good afternoon, supervisors, Carly Grove, department staff. Nothing really to add, but just to make myself available for any questions. Supervisor Peskin gave a great overview, so just wanted to also reiterate that the commissioners unanimously approved the modifications to the inclusionary housing program on January 11th. So available for any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we'll open up item 2 to public comment. All right, seeing no members of the public, then public comment is closed. Supervisor Safai.
Well, I just read through it further. I'm fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, Supervisor Peskin.
I would like to make a motion to send this item to the full board with recommendation.
All right, and we will do that without objection. Item 3, please.
Next on the agenda, item number 3. Ordinance creating underground district number 361 on 2nd Street from Bryant Street to Townsend Street. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see anyone from Supervisor Kim's office, but please proceed.
All right. Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Mike Rieger, project manager, San Francisco Public Works. I am the project manager for the 2nd Street Improvement Project, which is in San Francisco SoMa and financial districts from Market to King Streets. I'm going to give a presentation about the project overall and then discussion about the reasons behind this undergrounding ordinance that we are proposing. The 2nd Street Improvement Project has been a project since 2006 when it was identified as a priority in the San Francisco Bicycle Plan. Since then, San Francisco Public Works and MTA, PUC, SF Planning, Caltrans, the SFCTA, and FHWA have been working in partnership to get this project to move forward. We are currently in construction for the 2nd Street Improvement Project. The major goals for the project are to improve safety along the corridor, provide a more attractive pedestrian environment, provide a dedicated bicycle facility as identified in the San Francisco Bicycle Plan, and facilitate muni operations. Key elements of the project include repaving 2nd Street from Market to King Street, curb ramp upgrades, pedestrian improvements including widened sidewalks, traffic signal upgrades, raised crosswalks at all alleys, new bicycle facility, landscaping, streetscape amenities including pedestrian lighting, trash receptacles, benches, and bicycle racks, and utility undergrounding. The existing conditions of 2nd Street, this section that we're showing here shows the cross-section from Harrison to Townsend Streets where the undergrounding district is being proposed. The right-of-way is 82.5 feet wide. So part of the reason that we're proposing the undergrounding of utilities on 2nd Street is due to the fact that in this segment, the sidewalks are 10 feet wide on both sides of the street. And we are going to be widening the sidewalks from Harrison to Townsend to 15 feet in order to match the existing cross-section north of Harrison. Because we will be tearing up all of the existing sidewalks and much of the roadway. I'm sorry. Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Because we are expanding the sidewalks to 15 feet on both sides from Harrison to Townsend Street, we will be tearing up the right-of-way and part of the street to regrade the street slopes. And the existing utilities from Bryant to Townsend Street, overhead utilities, we found that this would be a key opportunity to underground those utilities. And currently on 2nd Street, the 8-block stretch, there are only 2 blocks of overhead utilities existing. The rest of the overhead utilities on 2nd Street are already undergrounded. This section here shows the proposed final product of the street. You can see that the sidewalks would be widened to 15 feet on both sides. And we'll be putting in raised cycle tracks for bicycles that are buffered. And then generally across 2nd Street, we'll be reducing the travel lanes from 2 traffic lanes, northbound, southbound, to 1 traffic lane, northbound, southbound. In this rendering, you can see at 2nd and South Park, you can see there on the east side of the street, those existing overhead utilities. This is sort of an after rendering, and this was done prior to the utility undergrounding being identified as an improvement. So the utilities are still there in that after photo, but you can see that the sidewalks are widened, the cycle track and bus boarding islands to facilitate muni. This is another existing condition photo. Here, the sidewalks are 10 feet wide. This is near Townsend Street. And the after shows the widened sidewalk, the new cycle track. Again, to implement this, we do need to tear up all of the existing sidewalks and part of the roadway, so it's an ideal opportunity to underground those utilities. So the ordinance that we are looking to pass encompasses 2nd Street, the district between Bryant and Townsend Street. This diagram sort of shows the area going a little bit north of Bryant Street, and that's only because there are some utility guy wires for the existing PG&E poles that go almost to Stillman. And in this district, the overhead utilities service 7 properties, 6 property owners. 1 property owner owns 2 buildings in this district. Just going through the undergrounding process, from May 2012 to May 2013, we held 4 major community outreach meetings. From that process, there was a request to underground these utilities on the 2 blocks in question. In December 2016, Supervisor Kim's office sent a letter to affected property owners in the district notifying them of the intent to create the district. May 2017, Public Works held an undergrounding district hearing for this area. Public comment received. There was only 1 property owner present to state that they were in favor of the district. In terms of responses from property owners that I've received personally, a lot have called with questions. However, they are generally supportive. I have not received any comment from property owners not in support. June 2017, the undergrounding district was approved by Public Works Director. In November 2017, the undergrounding district ordinance was introduced at the board. In terms of project funding, the 2nd Street Improvement Project is approximately $20 million. We have a combination of funding sources, including federal assistance from FHWA through the One Bay Area grant, which is programmed by the SFCTA. We also have Prop K matching dollars and Eastern Neighborhoods and Transit Center District Fund funding. To fund the undergrounding costs, we requested $2 million from the Eastern Neighborhoods and received approved recommendation for those funds. And property owners would pay the cost for the conversion of overhead to underground service. I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rieger. I was just wondering, what's the timeline? So it looks like, per your funding slide, that all the funding has been identified for the project. So what is the timeline for actual construction beginning?
So as I mentioned, the project is under construction currently. We've segmented the project into 4 segments. So right now, our contractor is working on 2nd Street from Townsend to King, which does not include any undergrounding, as well as 2nd from Market to Folsom, which also is already undergrounded. So the segment from Bryant to Townsend is not scheduled to begin until after the Giants season ends this October 2018. So we'd hope to begin the process of creating the new joint trench for underground utilities in October 2018.
Okay, and then all of it will be completed, or when is the anticipated completion date for all of it?
The entire project should be done in approximately November 2019.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions on this item? Nope. Or questions, Supervisor Safi?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So just from looking at your presentation, if this work is happening no matter what, so the work is already happening, you're widening the sidewalks, you're doing the improvements, is there any additional cost to the taxpayers for undergrounding, or is it the adjacent property owners that are paying for this?
There's no additional cost to taxpayers based on the undergrounding. Again, the funding for the undergrounding and creating that joint trench is funded by those impact fees from Eastern Neighborhoods. So all costs outside of that would be provided by property owners for that connection. As I said, there's only 7 properties.
No, I get it, but my point is that if you chose not to underground, would you be saving $2 million of those impact fees and you could utilize them in another area?
Those impact fees would potentially be reprogrammed for some other use in the Eastern Neighborhoods.
Right. So that's $2 million to do 2 blocks of undergrounding.
Correct.
So it is a cost to the taxpayers,
Yeah.
one way or another.
Right.
$2 million. Okay.
Thank you. Undergrounding is very expensive. All right.
Yes.
So with that, then we'll go to public comment on item 3. Any members of the public who wish to speak? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed. Colleagues, we have a motion on item 3.
Happy to send this to the full board with recommendation.
Can we take a roll call vote on that?
Okay. Roll call vote.
On the motion, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Safii.
No.
Safii, no. Chair Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. The motion passes.
All right. Item 3 passes. Thank you. Mr. Rieger, item 4, please.
Item number 4, ordinance amending the housing code to require that single-stall bathroom facilities in hotels be made available for use of all residents regardless of gender or gender identity, and to require the signage be posted to indicate the same.
Thank you. We have Carolyn Goosen here from Supervisor Ronen's office.
Hi, good afternoon. Supervisor Ronen couldn't be here today, but asked that I share her excitement about this legislation, which expands San Francisco's all-gender restroom law to include hotels, and most notably, our SRO hotels. This change comes out of the all-gender restroom law that Supervisor David Campos championed in 2016, requiring that all public single-room restrooms in San Francisco become gender neutral. Since that law came to pass, we have seen it lead to all-gender restrooms becoming the norm in restaurants, bars, and other public facilities across the city. But in the past year, transgender tenants of SROs have reached out to us to ask that the law be expanded to include SROs as well. This change, we were told, would help community members feel safer and more comfortable in their homes. As you know, 30,000 people, about 5% of San Franciscans, live in SROs, which are a critical source of our low-cost housing, and many of these units do not have their own private bathrooms, and people share toilet and bathing facilities with other residents. Some SROs already have started to use all-gender restrooms, but there are still a few that don't, and this would make it a requirement across the board. People of all genders, as well as disabled people with opposite gender care attendants and parents with children of other genders, deserve to feel safe and comfortable using the restroom. And so we ask for your support in passing this very common sense law and to help us create safer spaces. I wanted to thank our co-sponsors, Supervisor Kim, Sheehy, Peskin, and Fewer, as well as Mayor Farrell, who just signed on as a co-sponsor. And I wanted to thank everyone who's come out here today. In particular, a big thank you to Jordan Davies, a member of the SRO task force, and a transgender disability housing rights advocate who has fought for this from day one and who has done a lot of work with us to make this law into reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation, and to Supervisor Ronen for bringing forth this legislation. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments before we go to public comment? Supervisor Peskin?
No, I just would like to thank Jordan Davis as well.
Great. And with that, perhaps we'll begin public comment with Jordan Davis. And any other members of the public who'd like to speak on item 4.
Good afternoon, Jordan Davis, and I proudly serve on the city's SRO task force, where last June we voted to support a change in the housing code that would require single-use common restrooms in residential hotels to have gender-neutral signage. This is very historic legislation before you today. Although there are many SROs in San Francisco and elsewhere in California and beyond, nothing like this was ever done before, and this will set the standard for how future gender-neutral restroom laws are constructed, as this is the first time it will cover residential settings as well as bathing facilities. And I called for this after my own struggles in my hotel in the Tenderloin, as well as what I saw during outreach with the Missing SRO Collaborative and the Department of Building Inspection not being able to debate this under current laws. Although my name is in the papers a lot around this, I want to thank women of color, both trans and cis, who did the greatest amount of work to bring this to fruition, including Aria Saeed from the Human Rights Commission and Carolina Morales, who worked with my impatient self from the outset to get this bill drafted and before you today, and as well as all the transgender women of color who inspire us to do better. Thank you for all you do. In conclusion, I'm reminded of meeting Virginia legislator Danica Romm last month and how she talked about focusing on the boring stuff rather than her identity as a transgender woman. Please pass this historic legislation, not only for women, the transgender, gender-varying, intersex community, and disabled community, but so I can focus on the nuts and bolts issues for the health and safety of SRO tenants as part of my task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Claire Farley. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Mayor on Trans Initiatives and LGBT issues. The Mayor is co-sponsoring this bill, and I am here to share our support of this ordinance and the support of all gender restrooms and SROs and hotels. As shared earlier, U.S. data has found that 59% of transgender respondents avoid bathrooms because they're afraid of harassment. Every year, 14% of transgender people are harassed or assaulted when going to the restroom. All gender facilities address these concerns by being accessible to all people, regardless of gender or accessibility. In San Francisco, we have begun implementing the all-gender restrooms throughout the city, both for leased buildings, city-owned buildings, and public sector and public accommodations. And we know that this continues to be important for low-income housing as well. In conclusion, this is really crucial for the community as well as disabled residents who need easy access to the facilities. And we really want to share that in 2017, there's already been 19 bills introduced across the country to try to stop trans folks from using public accommodations. So we really are looking at San Francisco to continue to be a model on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hola, mi nombre es Versat Verdugo. Soy voluntaria de Miss Rock.
Hello, my name is Versat Verdugo, and I am a volunteer at
Miss Rock.
Miss Rock.
Y soy una chica transgénero que vive en hoteles de SRO.
I am a transgender woman that lives in an SRO.
La razón que pido para que apoyen esta legislación de que hayan baños neutrales es por mi experiencia que no me siento cómoda en baños de mujeres donde me critican y dicen que no encajo ahí.
The reason why I ask you to support this legislation for gender-neutral restrooms is because I have experienced harassment in the past.
Y si voy a baños de hombre también me empiezan a acosar y me siento en peligro, en mucho riesgo.
And if I go to a men's restroom, I feel endangered, and that's what happens there.
Entonces, por favor, les pido que pasen esta legislación para que tan siquiera sienta paz en el momento que vaya a usar un baño donde sea neutral.
So I ask you to please pass this legislation so I can go to the bathroom in peace and just support our cause, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hola, mi nombre es Adriana Key.
Hello, my name is Adriana Key.
Y como mujer transgénero, a veces soy criticada por usar el baño de mujeres.
And for being a transgender woman, sometimes I'm criticized for using the women's bathroom.
Pero tampoco me siento segura usando el baño de hombres.
But I also don't feel safe using the men's restroom.
Porque tengo este pecho.
Because I have breasts.
So, siento que no puedo usar el baño de hombres tampoco.
I feel like I can't use the men's restroom either.
Entonces, un baño de género neutral.
So a gender-neutral restroom.
Ayudaría mucho a que yo pudiera usar el baño sin sentirme, sin ser criticada por usar el baño de mujeres, y también pues no necesitaría me sentiría más a gusto.
A gender-neutral bathroom would keep me from being harassed for using the women's restroom, and a gender-neutral restroom would actually alleviate that problem.
Y por eso es que les pido que apoyen esta, ¿qué es ley o ordenanza?
Ordenanza.
Por eso les pido que apoyen esta ordenanza. Gracias.
And this is why I ask you to support this ordinance. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tim. I work with the Mission SRO Collaborative, a program of Dolores Street Community Services, and I'm here to support this ordinance on behalf of the trans community and all, LGBT community. I wholeheartedly believe in this bill. It's a wonderful intersection of gender and class, which always go together. It's been, the fight has been a long one, and even now the fight still goes on. I don't think we should think that that LGBT community members have have perfect safety everywhere they go. Just what happened in Los Angeles. Someone killed a transgender woman. So I think it's really great that we're doing this bill, and I think it's great that people in SROs are being paid attention to. I think this is also a great start politically because it tells SRO owners that legislators are paying attention to what's going on in those buildings and they're being regulated. So I think it's a great start around. So I thank you for supporting this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Kylie Hossman. I'm the coordinator of youth development and administration for the San Francisco Youth Commission. I'm here on behalf of our youth commissioners and want you to know that on December 18th, at a full youth commission meeting, they voted unanimously in support of all gender restrooms in residential hotels. The youth commissioners would like to thank Supervisors Ronan, Kim, Sheehy, Peskin, and Fewer for their support, and the youth commissioners urge Supervisors Tang and Safai to co-sponsor this legislation or at the very least to support it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Honey Mahogany. I am the co-founder of the Compton's Transgender Cultural District. I want to say congratulations to Supervisor Tang, or should I say Chairperson Tang in this situation. I am thrilled to be here and to see so much outstanding support for an effort put on by Jordan Davis and Hillary Ronan's office. As a gender nonconforming person, I can speak personally to the dangers and discomfort of having to choose between a men's and women's bathroom. I think this is an incredible opportunity to address the disparities that face gender nonconforming folks and trans people when accessing services. They are our most critical and at-risk population, and anything that we can do to support their ability to access services, I believe should be fully supported by the entire board. So I hope for those of you who have not signed on yet as co-sponsors that you will consider co-sponsoring or at the very least vote in support of this very important legislation. Thank you.
Hi, Tommy Avicoli Mecca from the Housing Rights Committee. We are fully in support of this legislation and hope that you will pass it. Personally, as a gay man who's been involved in the queer community since the early 70s, I'm extremely happy that this is happening. It's long overdue. It is, as Jordan said, historic, and gives me pride in San Francisco that often we are on the cutting edge and in pushing things like this, and we should be. Safety of tenants is an extremely important issue for us at Housing Rights Committee. So it's logical that we would be here in support because all tenants must be safe, and that means all, no exceptions. Despite the progress that the LGBT community has made in the past 40-something years, the reality is that there is still anti-LGBT violence in this country, and especially against transgender women of color. So thank you for what you're doing here and for helping to protect transgender tenants in San Francisco.
Hello, supervisors. Thank you for taking this time. My name is Pablo, and I work at CUAV, Community United Against Violence. We are a almost 40-year organization here in the city, providing services to survivors of domestic violence, hate violence, sexual assault, police violence, who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning. This legislation is imperative. It's long overdue, and I want to double and triple what people have already said. This, in some instances, is a matter of safety. It's a matter of life and death. It can be a matter of continuity of a good quality of life for a lot of folks, particularly in the trans community. And what we have at CUAV continue to track is the feeling of lack of safety in some of these SROs, in particular because of the shared bathrooms and needing to for lack of a better term, have a good relationship with your neighbors. You may not be family, but in some instances you get thrown into circumstances where, you know, you're living in a communal situation because of how things are set up. Having gender-neutral bathrooms is a very, you know, common sense, essential, simple thing that can be done that will go a tremendous way to providing more sense of safety and community for folks who are living in these buildings. And as legislation has already been done in the past here about gender-neutral bathrooms in, you know, businesses and other kinds of facilities, any and all, you know, businesses and hotels that have a relationship with the city, regardless of whether it's Twitter or Burger King or McDonald's or an SRO, I think it's imperative that gender-neutral bathrooms exist. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosario Cervantes, and I'm here to support this legislation for gender-neutral and gender-affirming restroom facilities in the SRO. I actually have a son who's a counselor, and he works with homeless people in SROs. So I'm here to support this legislation. I hope it passes. And thank you, Jordan Davis, for all your work, and thank you for all the supervisors that are sponsoring it. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the chair and supervisors of the committee. My name is Rebecca Levin. I am in support of the legislation towards gender-neutral and gender-affirming restroom facilities in SROs here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Luis Camarillo, and I am in support of the legislation towards gender-neutral and gender-affirming restroom facilities in the SROs here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Matias Morbino from Chinatown CDC, here to support this legislation in name of the Chinatown Community Development Center, but also our SRO Families Collaborative, who was excited and supportive of this legislation. So thank you, Jordan, for all your leadership and everybody who came and testified today.
Hello, supervisors. Thank you so much for considering this important legislation today. My name is Jessica Lehman with Senior in Disability Action, and we're in strong support of this legislation. First, of course, because we support the rights and dignity of all people, including those who are transgender or gender nonconforming. This is also a huge issue for the senior and disability community. And we had a work group looking at seniors and people with disabilities in SROs. There's a huge proportion of seniors and people with disabilities living in SROs. And all gender bathrooms can also be an issue for somebody who has a care attendant who goes into the bathroom with them who may be of a different gender. I know I've experienced that myself, being in a wheelchair, having an attendant who was male. You know, the looks, the comments, it's obviously very uncomfortable, and I know I only know the half of it as a cisgendered woman. And so by making bathrooms all gender, we're really allowing people to not have to worry about their safety anytime they use the restroom. This is also, we think it's really an important culture shift to really look at how are we valuing all bodies, whether they are transgender or gender nonconforming bodies, aged bodies, disabled bodies, that we are all valued. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 4? Okay, if not, thank you everyone for coming. Public comment is closed. And again, thanks to Supervisor Ronen for bringing this up. I thought it was a complete oversight when we had passed legislation around all gender bathrooms. I didn't realize that SROs were not included, so I'm glad that it's being addressed here. Colleagues, any other questions, comments? If not, then maybe a motion.
I would be honored to forward this to the full board with positive recommendation.
Oh, sorry, Supervisor Safai?
Yes, and I support this as well. Just want to say congratulations to Jordan on his leadership. I know we just appointed him to the SRO task force just recently.
Her.
I'm sorry, her. Her to the SRO task force, and her aggressive leadership on this issue has been wonderful for this community. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you. And I apologize for that. I'm sorry, I was distracted.
Thank you. And Supervisor Cohen has joined us. Supervisor Cohen? Sorry, was your name on the roster for this item? Different item. Okay. All right, so there was a motion, and we can do that without objection to send forth to the full board with positive recommendation. All right, thank you. Mr. Clerk, can we call item 5?
Item number 5, hearing on the coordination between the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, technical and implementation teams.
Thank you. And this hearing is sponsored by Supervisor Cohen, and she has joined us here on Land Use, so I'll turn it over to Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to have the discussion here at the Land Use Committee. Forgive me, but I have some very long comments because I've got some real concerns that I want to make sure that I'm able to articulate here today. What we have here this afternoon is an opportunity to discuss the process used by the Bike Share Department and the Executive Director of the SFMTA, which was used to determine that social bikes, also better known as jump bikes, was the best dockless bike share operator for San Francisco. So in particular, I'm looking to understand the criteria that was used to decide that jump bikes was most complementary to motivates Ford Go Bikes. Also, the city's bike share program, and truly the best option for constituents who choose to use bike share as a mode of transportation. So my office, quite frankly, has received numerous emails and feedback from a number of bike share companies that were in the application and permit queue with MTA, and they don't feel I feel two things. First, I didn't feel that, one, the communication about the process was adequate, and two, that the offerings of the organizations were understood and considered by MTA. So these are serious concerns that have been leveled against the MTA, and I'm concerned by the suggestion that MTA didn't conduct a thorough and competitive process before bestowing jump bikes with the sole pilot dockless bike share permit for the next 18 months. So the reason why I called today's hearing is because this matter is, frankly, not only a matter of fairness, transparency, and due process for the companies interested in providing the service, but it's also about transportation and transportation access, healthy opportunities, competitive pricing, the safety for constituents across the entire city, and just to name a few. So I come to talk a little bit about bike share. So what is this all about? The goal of an expanded bike share program is to achieve 20% of trips traveled by bike. We've seen the Ford Go Bikes on the streets. It was launched in June of 2017 and currently has 120 stations in San Francisco. The network of the bike stations are ultimately to expand to over 300 stations and approximately 4,500 bikes in San Francisco by the end of 2018. Now, because of the design of the bike share program, the bike share rollout program in my district, and other communities on what some consider to be the outskirts of San Francisco, we won't get bike stations until the fall of this year, despite the program beginning in June of 2017. So I'm sure you can see why I'm a little personally frustrated about this. And this is why jump bikes came into the picture. They saw an opportunity to provide service to communities that were not being efficiently served by the city's program. I can't necessarily speak to the transportation access in parts of District 4 or District 11 that will be getting Ford Go Bike stations at the end of this year, but as my district will. But if you know anything about the southeastern neighborhoods, you know that historically there's been an unquantifiable disinvestment in decent transportation access. And this has been going on for far too long. So it's for this reason that I want to say that I see bike share as the next best thing. There is a net benefit here. Bike share gives users an additional travel option and also provides them a social experience. It's a flexible system that helps keep people active, which I understand the value of. But bike share is not exclusively about travel options and reducing the miles traveled by single occupancy vehicles. Bike share companies are not unlike rideshare companies in that their bottom line is to collect data. These companies want to know where the traveler is going, how often they are going there, and the proximity of the destination to one's home, work, and frequented places. They want to capture data, and I'm hopeful that this data will be shared with our city to assist us in urban planning decisions from congestion management to, frankly, street design. Ridership data can be a real tool to support the land use and infrastructure decisions, both in the near and long-term future. However, if our experiences with the rideshare companies who are notorious for obstructing or simply refusing to share their user data are any indication of the potential obstacles, I want to be sure that we are taking every possible precaution to ensure that the companies we choose to do business with and companies that we choose to allow to operate on our streets are indeed coming to the table with a sense of partnership. And so, to back up my original statement, I want to understand why it was the informed opinion of multiple parties within the San Francisco Metropolitan Transportation Authority agency that Jump Bikes was the best option for San Francisco. Now, I understand that Motivate Forward Bike Go Bikes has an exclusive right to operate a bike share program, and I'm not interested in rehashing the terms of the contract we signed with Motivate or necessarily the public settlement agreement. What is in question is the nature of the process used to proceed Jump Bikes services. Now, while Section 909 F6S of the Transportation Code states that the SFMTA director has the singular authority to approve these bike share permits, we still have a permitting process structure that exists. I won't read that process, but these processes exist so not to give the appearance of preferential treatment to any company which seeks to do business in San Francisco and to communicate with the public that we are making decisions that are centered in their best interests. So I'm not comfortable, and I don't know that I see value in having the only approval go through the Director of Transportation as opposed to coming through the MTA Board or the Board of Supervisors. I will admit that I have a series of questions that I will ask the representatives from MTA. With that, I want to recognize Director Ed Riskin and Jamie Parks from the Bike Share Program. They're here with us in this chamber. And Madam Chair, I would turn the rest of the hearing over to you.
And Supervisor Cohen, who would you like to call up first?
I think
Director Ruskin? Or?
Yes, I'd like to call out the director,
Director
please.
Ruskin, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Tang, members of the committee, Supervisor Cohen. Thanks for giving us an opportunity.
Yes.
I appreciate the opening remarks to help orient us here. What I'll do, and I think that was a good overview and clear questions that we will endeavor to answer to our best ability. I do want to just add as overview that, as you know, bicycling is a very important mode of transportation in San Francisco. It's the fastest growing mode of transportation in San Francisco. Both the MTA board and this board of supervisors have set very ambitious mode share targets for bicycling in the city. And we as an agency, with the support of the mayor and the board of supervisors, have been working on a number of different fronts to make bicycling a better option for more people, for more trips. Everything from infrastructure that we're putting in the ground to safety education that we support. There's a number of things we're doing to try to meet those mode shift goals that both you and the MTA board have established and that are part of our overall climate change strategy as well. We see bike share as an important part of the overall move to increase bicycling in San Francisco, something that we've been engaged in here in San Francisco for probably up to 5 years now. Like every other aspect of transportation in San Francisco and generally, bike share is a very dynamic industry at the moment, and like pretty much everything that has to do with transportation in San Francisco, there's a lot of different opinions about how to do this the right way, and there's controversy over decisions about how much of this, how little of this, how broad, how narrow. We've been working to try to strike the right balance so that we can optimize the emergence of this relatively new way for people to access bicycles, but do it in a way that's responsible, that's going to ultimately advance our overall city transportation goals. So we will try our best, as I said, to answer the questions in the presentation. Of course, we'll be here for any follow-up questions and public comment, and we have others here as well as Mr. Parks to try to walk you through this. So if I could, I'll turn it over to Jamie Parks, who's a manager in our Livable Streets division, who will give you an overview and try to answer some of the questions that were posed by Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Although I haven't posed all of my questions, but no, I've put enough out there to get us started. Mr. Parks, how are you?
Very good.
Good.
Good afternoon, Chair Tang, members of the committee. Again, Jamie Parks with SFMTA, and I oversee our bicycle programs, which include bike share. And I'm really happy to be here today to answer your questions. It was actually only about 11 months ago that I presented at this same committee as part of passing the legislation that created our current stationless bike share program. And as Director Ruskin alluded to, there's been a lot of activity in those last 11 months. So I think this is a really great opportunity to report back to this committee on our progress in implementing that legislation. Recognizing that bike share is a complex and fast-moving industry, I want to start with a brief overview of our program and the recent decisions that Supervisor Cohen mentioned in her remarks. And hopefully this will help address some of the key questions up front. And of course, I'll be happy to take any questions that you have after the presentation. So I want to start by just saying that it's a really exciting time for bike sharing and that the SFMTA is really excited with all of the interest in bike sharing. Ultimately, we see the interest as a very good thing, and to the extent that stationless bike share helps to make our transportation system safer and more equitable and more accessible, which are the goals underlying all of our decisions, then we support it. But there are also a lot of questions regarding the operation of stationless bike share in San Francisco, and so we want to proceed with caution as well as with optimism. And it's exactly that balance of caution and optimism that led to our decision to issue a permit to Jump Bikes for a pilot evaluation of 18 months, bringing stationless e-bikes to San Franciscans now, while also providing the time and data that we need for a thorough assessment of the potential for stationless bike share in San Francisco in the future. Before I get into the details of the pilot program with Jump, I want to provide a little bit of background on bike sharing in San Francisco for context. Bike sharing in San Francisco more or less began in 2013 with the Bay Area Bike Share program. Bay Area Bike Share was a small system with approximately 350 bikes, and like our current approach to stationless bike share, it began as a pilot program. The good news with the pilot system was that it worked. People liked it and used it. The bad news was cost. Expanding the system to meet demand would cost tens of millions of dollars, money that simply wasn't available through any public sources at the time. As a result, San Francisco, in partnership with the Regional Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, and several other Bay Area cities, settled on a public-private partnership model for bringing bike share to San Francisco by waiving permit fees, assisting with station siting, and allowing private sponsorship. We'd be able to get the bike share system that we needed at a cost that we could afford. Under the Ford Go Bike model, or the public-private partnership model, the Board of Supervisors approved a contract with Motivate and MTC in 2015 to provide a privately sponsored bike share system in San Francisco. And that was the beginning of Ford Go Bike. The system officially launched in June 2017 and replaced the original Bay Area Bike Share. There are currently 120 stations and approximately 1,400 Ford Go Bikes in San Francisco, which will increase to over 300 stations and over 4,000 bikes by the end of this year. But at the same time that Ford Go Bike was being planned and launched, the new model of stationless bike share was also emerging. The stationless model expanded rapidly in 2016, starting in China, but more recently in the United States and throughout the world. There are a lot of different variations of stationless bike share, but fundamentally, stationless bike share refers to bikes that don't require dedicated docking stations like those used for Ford Go Bike. Some stationless bikes lock to bike racks, some are freestanding. The bikes themselves have integrated GPS units, fare payment, and internal locking mechanisms, and they're generally accessed by smartphone apps. There are a half dozen or more major private operators. Several Chinese cities even have over 1 million bikes in circulation alone. This creates significant issues for maintaining safe and accessible and orderly public rights-of-way, as the photo here of a blocked and inaccessible sidewalk in Australia shows. But it's also proving to be a very popular mode of transportation, and it's a promising tool to increase cycling, which, as Director Reskin mentioned, is an important goal of the MTA. The first stationless bike share operator to approach San Francisco was Blue Gogo in early 2017. And rather than simply watch what happened and respond later, which has too often been the case with emerging transportation technologies, we developed San Francisco-specific regulations for stationless bike share to ensure that this emerging service would serve the public interest. And we worked very closely with the Board of Supervisors, including this committee, and the SFMTA Board of Directors to pass both Division I and Division II Transportation Code legislation. The legislation passed in March 2017 and established a permit program for operating stationless bike share in San Francisco and accompanying violations and fines. Based on our experiences dealing with Blue Gogo, a company that acted first and talked to the city later, and I should also note has gone bankrupt since, taking millions of dollars of user deposits with it, as well as issues that we observed with the public right-of-way obstruction and maintenance in Chinese and other cities that had stationless bike share. The intent of our stationless bike share permit was for stationless bike share operators in San Francisco to be held to the same high bar that we set for Motivate and the Ford Go Bike system. We wanted stationless bike share to serve the public interest and promote public health and safety. There's a lot of detail in the legislation, but there are just a few key themes that I want to bring to your attention. First is equity. The bikes must be available across a wide geography that includes disadvantaged communities, and the memberships must be affordable to people with low incomes. Second, the systems must maintain the public right-of-way in a way that doesn't allow stationless bike share bicycles to be a nuisance, blocking paths or creating obstructions that make sidewalks inaccessible. And finally, responding to one of Supervisor Cohen's comments, we do require data sharing to ensure that the operators are meeting their responsibilities and that the data that comes from the stationless bike share programs is fully available to the public. Other key components include approved maintenance plans, outreach plans, and appropriate insurance requirements. Stationless bike share permits are issued by the Director of Transportation and allow for consideration of bicycle overcrowding and impacts to the bike share network as a whole in making the decision as to whether to grant a permit. Following creation of the program, the SFMTA received application materials and/or met with representatives of 6 different stationless bike share operators between July of 2017 and December 2017. Staff reviewed each application independently and in the order that they were received in accordance with the legislation that created the program. During this time, the SFMTA, MTC, and Motivate also entered into a settlement agreement regarding stationless bike share. This agreement ensures that stationless bike share in San Francisco complies with our existing contract and partnership with Motivate, while also furthering innovation in the bike share field that was not anticipated in 2015 when the original contract was signed. The settlement agreement was finalized November 28, 2017, and provides a few key terms. First, Motivate agrees that the MTA may issue a single stationless bike share permit, and that the permit would only be issued for electric assist pedal bikes or e-bikes.
Mr. Parks, can I just jump in? The settlement agreement entered into as of November 27th, 2017, was the settlement of what?
It was a settlement over how the Motivate contract with the SFMTA and the City of San Francisco applied to stationless bike share bikes and how the exclusive rights in that contract applied to stationless bike share bikes.
Was it the settlement of a claim, of litigation, of a provision pursuant to the original agreement between the MTC, the MTA, and Motivate? What exactly were you settling?
There was no litigation. There was a dispute resolution clause in the contract that was exercised to prevent any litigation from happening and address concerns before they got to that point.
And the solicitation with the 6 potential stationless bike companies preceded that November 27th date?
Much of it preceded that, and the discussions with those operators continued during the discussions about the settlement agreement as well, during October and November.
And in the settlement agreement, which states that Motivate agrees to a one-time exception exclusive in its exclusivity in the area of e-bikes, presumably under the theory that e-bikes were not a part of the Motivate contract. What does the settlement agreement, which appears to be silent, contemplate after 18 months? Do you guys go and invoke the dispute resolution? Because the settlement agreement seems to be silent on that.
So what happens after 18 months is dependent on the results of this pilot evaluation, and I'm happy to talk more and have a little bit of discussion in the presentation even about what we'll be evaluating. But in terms of what will happen after 18 months, we really don't know until we see how the JUMP program performs here in San Francisco and how stationless bike share performs elsewhere in kind of our peer cities around the country. Okay. And alluding to your point about e-bikes, also wanted to just mention that the settlement agreement really advances our policy goals as the SFMTA around stationless bike share as well. And we are particularly excited for the potential of e-bikes. In combination with the stationless bike share model, that e-bikes can really be an important new transportation service that complements Forward Go Bike and allows bike share to serve additional neighborhoods and customers. And regarding the permitting process itself with different operators, JUMP was the first operator that was eligible for a permit under our program. JUMP submitted its initial application in July 2017 prior to any other company. It was also the first and only company that fulfilled all of the permit requirements, which it did with its November 2017 submittal. One of those requirements that was very key was the data sharing requirement. That was something that we heard a lot of reluctance from other stationless operators to provide the full data that we were requiring. JUMP submitted to that permit requirement. And JUMP was also the only operator that submitted an application to the SFMTA to operate e-bikes.
And was there a set of criteria about what the SFMTA was looking for? I mean, did it say in October when these proposals were rolling in after we and then the MTA Commission legislated stationless bike permitting, getting ahead of these new transportation technologies? Did you say to the potential world of stationless bike sharing companies, we are looking for e-bikes, that is a criteria, we are looking for data sharing, that is a criteria, if you do not have those, you will be deemed to be incomplete?
Yes. So following the passage of the legislation, we developed permit application materials based on that legislation that were very detailed in terms of what we were requiring from the operators. That included detailed data sharing provisions, as well as making sure that they had a plan for us that made sense to us about how they'd maintain the public right-of-way. And one of the things that we're really happy that JUMP provided is that the bicycles have integrated U-locks, which are shown on the slide that I would be showing right now. So they have an integrated U-lock on the bicycles so that they lock directly to racks, preventing a lot of the sidewalk blocking that we might see with other stationless operators. So we did provide a very detailed list of requirements.
Including the requirement for electrically assisted bicycles?
E-bikes were not an explicit requirement of the permit applications.
Well, I guess just reading the settlement agreement, it looked like it was, essentially.
I have a question.
Okay, Supervisor Cohen, if you could address that too.
To communication to all the companies. Were they notified, all the other applicants?
Were they notified at which point?
What outreach did you do to make an advance to the applicants that you would only be considering one dockless e-bike company for a permit?
We never provided any promises to any operators that we'd be issuing any number of permits. The number of permits could have been 0 or any number, so we never made any promises.
So my question is, did this go to all of the companies, or was this only to one company, or to no companies?
We provided the same information at the same times to all different operators.
Okay. Do Do you have
Okay.
more to your presentation?
I just have, I think, one more slide, I think. So I think the main thing that I wanted to end with is talking about the pilot evaluation metrics, since I think that's a pretty important piece of this. We are really hopeful to use this 18-month period as an opportunity to learn how stationless bike share fits into the San Francisco context and how it can play an important role in our transportation system, and make amendments to the program as required based on that. So the pilot evaluation really falls along two different axes. First is what kind of transportation service is really being provided? Is the demand high? Who's using the system? Where are they going? Fundamentally, is stationless bike share successful in filling a gap in San Franciscans' existing travel options? And then the second axis is whether or not there are any secondary impacts associated with the system, including blocked sidewalks, broken bikes, proliferation of graffiti, and additional operational costs for city crews. So how the magnitude of any secondary impacts compare to transportation benefits. So I'll stop here so that we can get into any specific details I wasn't able to cover. But my short summary is that the SFMTA is eager to promote bike share innovation, but also to do so in a responsible way. And we're confident that our approach of starting with a limited pilot, similar to our past successes with pilots on Bay Area bike share, car sharing, and commuter shuttles, ensures that we're putting the public interest of San Francisco residents first in the process. And so that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Parks. Supervisor Cohen,
Thank you.
you're still
I've
on
got
the
about
roster?
3.5 questions, and really has to do with the half one goes back to my original question, because I'm concerned because I'm getting conflicting information with what Mr. Parks is telling me. I'm under the impression, and I have heard from other companies, that no one was advised of the terms of the settlement, and that no one was the other companies were not advised that it would be a one permit e-bike only, and quite frankly, that applicants only became aware in January when MTA issued a memo. When the MTA came out issuing a memo saying that the permit was awarded to Jump for e-bikes only. And so how do you explain this discrepancy? Do you have an email? How do you substantiate your claims?
Sure. So the terms of the settlement agreement themselves were not shared with any stationless company until January 8th, 2018. And that process was a confidential process. It was not discussed with any of the applicants while it was underway.
Okay, my next question. The bike share universe is very different than when the initial MOU was signed between MTA, MTC, and the Ford Go Bikes. And at the time, there was, quite frankly, fewer bike share operators interested in entering into the space. But now there are a number of companies, and I understand that MTA recently signed a settlement agreement, which is public, agreeing that we would only consider e-bike applicants. So following the execution of that settlement agreement, why didn't you advise the industry that you would only consider e-bikes, or put out a public statement at a minimum of this new position? Again, my issues are with the process.
Yep, sure. So we shared the results of the settlement agreement as quickly as we could. It did take about 6 weeks to finalize the decision-making process and brief the mayor's office, and particularly with the sudden death of Mayor Ed Lee, there was an additional couple weeks thrown in there in terms of our ability to get that information out to the operators. In terms of setting up a competitive process, at the time of the settlement agreement, we felt very comfortable moving forward with the Jump application. They were the only company that had submitted an application at that time that offered e-bikes. And they were also the only company that had fulfilled the terms of our permit requirements after 6 months of discussion. And so we were really eager to get started with the pilot and put something out on the street and make sure that we were able to get the evaluation going and move forward.
Okay, so in an email dated January 8th in 2018, this is an email from Director Riskin, you state that the decision to select JUMP was, quote, based on a thorough review of the permit application documenting that it meets or exceeds all San Francisco stationless bike share permit requirements, end quote. If you could describe for me this thorough review, I would appreciate it. Was this a comparative review that included other bike companies, or is this just a review on the application, on the individual application itself?
It was not a comparative review. It was reviewed strictly on the permit requirements that were in our permit application based on our legislation, and that's how we reviewed all the applications that were received, were reviewed independently from each other. The specifics of the application itself, there is a lot of detail in there. Several of the key things that we were looking for that were, I think, challenging for some of the operators to come up with, including JUMP for some time, were detailed lab testing documenting the safety of the bicycles that were being used, insurance requirements for the operators, data sharing requirements, that data be shared directly with the SFMTA and not with a third party or not with some of the data being withheld. Affordable memberships for low-income members. The JUMP system offers a $5 annual pass that allows up to 1 hour of free use every day for the year for all the members. That met our affordable membership requirement. And then service to disadvantaged communities and kind of serving a broad geographic area. So those were some of the key things that we looked for. And I'm happy to provide more detail on that, or the application submittals themselves as well, if that's of interest.
Well, how did you know that JUMP is the best company for San Francisco?
I think in the case of this permit program, they were the first and only company to meet our permit requirements, which is the basis on which we were issuing permits. And it was also our policy judgment and recommendation to proceed very cautiously with the program and not to issue a large number of permits.
Well, the thing that concerns me is that you're saying that JUMP is best for San Francisco, but yet you didn't really do a comparative analysis with all the other companies. So how can you discern one is better than the other when you don't take into consideration the others?
Well, yeah. The other companies were also, their application materials, to the extent that they were submitted, were also reviewed.
But the other companies didn't know the criteria.
The same criteria as the permit application requirements, meeting all 47 permit requirements or whatever was in there, that those were shared with all companies and they were all aware of those requirements.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is that they didn't know that you're only going to approve e-bikes. That was not disclosed. So you see how it's a little bit flawed and unfair. I'm going to move on to my next question.
Supervisor Cohen, can I just, I just want to get on the record or really clarify, were other companies notified, yes or no, that there was a requirement to have e-bikes at the same time?
Yep. They were all provided the same information at the same time regarding e-bikes. Whether or not there's a requirement for e-bikes, I think that really the settlement agreement is really a documentation that Motivate would not dispute an e-bike permit that we granted.
And I see.
For clarification. Yeah. Since this seems to be, this is Luis Montoya. I actually oversee Jamie's work in the bicycle safety and generally. Since this is such a key point for the committee, I want to offer a little bit of clarification. I think Jamie's a little bit struggling to elucidate. There was lots of policy discussion at the staff level as we reviewed the information at hand and the applications from what our other peer cities were experiencing.
Sir, I'm sorry, what's your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Luis Montoya.
Luis Montoya, and your role in MTA is?
I oversee Jamie's work. I oversee all the bicycle and pedestrian safety. Jamie's our bicycle program manager, and I oversee other things as well.
Montoya.
Okay. So at the staff level, based on what we were seeing in the industry, we were prepared to make a recommendation that, as Jamie described, this was the best fit for San Francisco. However, the decision hadn't been made to issue JUMP a permit until January. There was, as Jamie mentioned, there was internal discussions about that. Motivate indicated that they might have a problem with issuing, permits for a stationless bicycle. That's why they initiated the settlement negotiations per the contract. And so we had to clarify with them what San Francisco's intentions might be, and then we had to confirm what San Francisco's intentions actually were. And it really wasn't until January that the policy call was made to give JUMP the permit. We were just, studying it up until that point. And then once that decision was made, the permit was issued, we offered the same information to all of the applicants at that time.
Supervisor Peskin?
If I can just hop in on this same thing and just help me out here, because I have what I think is the exact same memorandum that I've received twice that, as far as I can tell, just paging through it, which speaks to everything that you're talking about. The first one is dated December 11th, and the second one is dated January 8th. Right. And the December 11th one seems to come to the conclusion that you came to, not in January, but in December, that there was only one company that you recommended,
correct,
which is JUMP.
Right. Are you referring to the memo from Jamie to Ed Riskin?
From Jamie, no, well,
Sorry,
it's
from Ed to Jamie?
It's from Ed through Tom McGuire, Luis Montoya, Jamie Parks, to the bike share program staff and interested parties. And it's the exact, as far as I can tell, it's the exact same memo. So it seems to me that you all came to this conclusion at some point.
But we weren't prepared. Yes, you're right that we had done the analysis to come up with the general recommendation, but we weren't prepared to issue the permit. And so I'm just trying to get to the point at which we did share the information was when the final decision was made, when a permit was issued, and we did share the information more broadly.
If I may, just kind of from a high-level policy standpoint, as the author of the legislation, and thank you to all my colleagues who voted to have a permitting scheme for stationless bike share in the face of Blue Go-Go's onslaught that hath come and evaporated. So I think we wanted to get ahead of the technology, and then you promulgated your own internal regulations as set forth in the legislation that we approved for the part of the transportation code that we oversee. And I realized I was not on the board at the time that we have this exclusivity arrangement with Motivate. I think what I'm hearing from Supervisor Cohen, I think all the members of this panel share, is that whatever went down was done fairly. And so I think the concern is if you had other parties out there who didn't know the rules of the game and did not know until the settlement agreement came along on November 27th that the primary criteria was electric-assisted bikes, in addition to data and safety and all of the other provisions. I think that's where, I don't want to put words in my colleagues' mouths, but I think that's the source of concern that you're hearing. And maybe the right thing is what you've done, which is whoever won it fair and square gets 18 months of stationless bike exclusivity. I'm not pushing back on that. I'm just pushing back on whether or not everybody knew that the one criteria that became a criteria, e-bikes, had to be a part of their application. I mean, if other folks didn't know that, that might be a little bit of a problem in terms of a fair, playing field.
Okay.
Supervisor Tang, may I follow in that same line of question?
All right. Is that okay,
It's the same
Supervisor?
question.
Sure. Safai? Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor. So Supervisor Peskin is somewhat correct. I think that it's important to note that they came to the decision in November, and that's also the same day that the settlement was signed. And it was almost like a CYA move. In the same January 8th email, it states that JUMP was recommended for approval. And I can show you, I have a table I can share with you. On the same day that the settlement agreement was reached with Motivate, So I guess my question is, when did you or the bike share team decide that Jump Bikes would be receiving the exclusive contract? And again, we're talking about a memo.
Yeah. So
dated, the decision was made on 11/27, and then a memo was dated on January 8th. And in the January 8th memo, it's recommending approval for Jump.
So if I may, through the chair, let me try, because I feel like we're getting the same question and giving answers that aren't quite meeting the mark.
Yes.
So I want to reemphasize that after the Board of Supervisors adopted the legislation to authorize this permit program, the MTA Board of Directors then approved legislation that laid out the requirements of the permit program. That information was shared with everyone. We then developed the actual permit requirements, and that was shared with everyone, and this was all at the same time. At that time, we didn't anticipate or have in mind that we would, as Jamie said, do 0 permits, 15 permits. This was putting it out to the industry. We subsequently got, I think, up to 6 different applications, one of which, the first one in, was the first one complete, and I think the only one complete. And then it was in the intervening time that, because of the dispute resolution mechanism that was invoked with the contract that the Board of Supervisors authorized us to enter into, authorized the city to enter into with Motivate and MTC, that we arrived at the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement, essentially what it says is that Motivate will not object on the basis of their understanding of the exclusivity provision in the contract to the city issuing a permit for e-bikes with the other parameters that are there. It doesn't, our signing that agreement did not preclude us from issuing other permits legally. It's just an agreement that they would acknowledge our ability to issue this one e-bike permit, not specifying who the provider would be without compromising the exclusivity clause. So that was the resolution of the dispute resolution process that was invoked. I don't remember if it was invoked by Motivate or MTC. Throughout that process, we were communicating very closely with folks in the mayor's office, because this whole contract really came about through the mayor's office and then approved by the Board of Supervisors. We wanted to make sure that we were kind of keeping in line with the policy intent of the original Motivate contract to be the region's bike share provider, recognizing that the industry had significantly changed from 2015 to where we were in 2017. So the time lag between the signing of the settlement agreement and the decision and the authorization of the single permit and the notification to the rest of the providers that was our intent, which basically was our time to finalize our deliberations in terms of whether we wanted to issue just one permit or more. And we were also engaging with the mayor's office at the time, where we were undergoing a changes in administration. So that is the lag between when the settlement agreement was approved and when we notified all of the providers at the same time that this was our intent. So we did not have a requirement for e-bikes at the start. We didn't have one subsequently, but after we approved the settlement agreement, we decided that the best path was to start slowly and modestly as a pilot. And what weighed in favor of issuing this first permit was that it was the one permit application that was complete, that it was e-bikes, which distinguished themselves from the bikes that we currently have in the bike share program, and that these bikes lock to an existing bike rack. That was the basis for making that decision, and we did notify the industry of that information all at the same time.
Director Riskin, you're saying that you did notify or communicate this decision to the people that were in the queue?
we made that notification to everybody at the same time, which was in the beginning of January.
Can I hop in for 1 second, Supervisor Cohen? Because I've actually now compared the December 11th and January 8th memoranda together. Do I have permission to do that?
Yes.
And I realize there's actually one line that's different between the two memos. And the one line is, so this is table 1 on page 3, summary of stationless bike share permit applications. And there's a list of the 6 operators, whether they have an e-bike, yes or no, whether they have a locking mechanism, yes or no, and the status. And the one thing that's different between the two memos is that for the second one, Lime Bike, it indicates that on December 26, 2017, a revised application was received. Did that revised application, maybe staff knows this, I don't know if you know this, was that substantially different than their original application from July? In other words, did they get the memo that they, in order to be competitive, they needed to have e-bikes?
They made a number of changes to their application with the December 26, 2017 submittal. Reviewing that, it still did not meet all of our requirements. There was a number of issues with it. So I think in particular, the data sharing, they were suggesting a different way of doing the data sharing that would not have allowed us full access to the data. They also, there were some of the lab testings related to the safety of the bicycles and some of the insurance requirements that they did not submit as well. And so it was revised substantially, but it still did not meet all of our requirements.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Cohen.
Supervisor Safai, waiting patiently.
No, I wanted to give the opportunity to Supervisor Cohen. This is her hearing, and I wanted to have her ask and direct a lot of the questions, and it's been good to listen and actually have the settlement agreement in front of me. The real problem that I have with all of this is seems like it started with an outcome that you're trying to get to and back your way into it. And this is one of the problems when you have an exclusive monopoly for one group, and that's fine. That's been negotiated. That's 2015. And so here we are. We have one group that has technology that's about removing parking spaces in the public right-of-way. But now, since that time, the technology has changed rapidly, and there are multiple companies that are doing this around the world that do it not in the public right-of-way, but do it on the sidewalk. And it seems to me, one question that I have is, how many of the other companies that are doing stationless bike are electric?
Currently 0.
0.
Several have expressed an interest.
Right, okay. So they've expressed an interest, and so has, according to the settlement agreement, so has Go Ford Bike. They intend to make every good faith effort to develop an e-bike program so that they now will be competitive in that 18-month period. So it doesn't seem to me, who I represent, which is the public, which is the people that put us in this seat, this doesn't seem like a good deal for the public. This seems like a good deal for Ford Go Bike, and maybe it's a good deal for the SFMTA, but it doesn't seem like a good deal for the general population that are trying to expand access to bicycles. So what I don't understand is, if you had an intended outcome and you wanted to choose one group, why not set your parameters, have everyone apply, have a certain date, and then receive the applications, and then choose the company based on the parameters that you set? But instead, every step of the way, from what I've heard from my colleagues here, based on memos and other information provided to us, you continued to adjust until you finally got to where you wanted to be. And that does not seem fair to anyone, the public, other companies, other organizations. And then that gets me to my last point. Supervisor Peskin and I had put forward a charter amendment to deal in many ways with things exactly like this. Because it seems to me that this was being driven by one branch of government to appease a contract that was designed before I was even on this board. And now here we are faced with this choice with choosing, and you know what? Jump might be the right company. They might be the best one. They might be the one that the public deserves to have and have access to, but the process by which that you got to this point does not seem defensible in any way. I've listened for 35 minutes. The same question was asked by all of us here, and all the answer should have been was no. That's what the answer should have been. But instead, we've got a whole bunch of different, explanations to get to the point where you started at a conclusion that you wanted to back into. That's what it seems like to me. And I understand you have an exclusive agreement with one company that you're trying to avoid litigation with, but theirs was in the public right-of-way. The sidewalks are not the public right-of-way. They're the sidewalks. So maybe you need to litigate that. And maybe we need to have more competition and have more choice for the general public. So, I mean, we've put forward a piece of legislation now, interim to our charter amendment, that allows for an appeal process on curb management, public right-of-way, and this ultimately might end up back in front of us. So I would encourage you to not approve this and go back through a better process and allow all the companies to apply. And then you still might end up with the same conclusion. And then that will be more defensible.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one overarching question while I have you here on both stationless and station bike share. And insofar as we're putting a premium on the safety of the bicycle themselves, one thing that occurs to me all the time when I see this is just that none of these stationless or station facilities come with helmets. And I know we want the bikes themselves to be manufactured in a way that's safe, but nobody has a brain bucket that rides them. And I was wondering, what is the kind of institutional response to that?
I think in general, we would encourage everybody who's riding a bicycle, whether it's a bike share bike or a private bicycle, to wear a helmet. But the reality is that wearing a bicycle helmet is not required by law. It's a recommendation for your own personal safety. And there are a lot of public benefits to bicycling, regardless of whether you're wearing a helmet. And so we have educational programs around bike sharing. There are ways to get helmets for free or low cost, and we encourage people to use that. But the benefits of bike sharing, with or without a helmet, were something that we saw as being in the public interest.
And then the second thing is the scuttlebutt is that Jump is soon to be purchased by Uber. Do you know anything about that?
I know nothing about that.
And everybody in our capitalist society has the right to buy anything that's for sale, so I'm not challenging that. But I am, to the extent that that could happen, worrying that one mode share interest might sabotage another mode share interest in order to stifle other modes of transportation. So you, to the extent that this is true, or for that matter, not true but could become true, you might want to structure whatever permits that you have, whether it's for Jump or any other type of stationless, or for that matter, station facility, to make sure that you don't end up with what big oil car manufacturers and tire manufacturers did, which was colluded to make sure that everybody would be buying cars and gasoline and tires by ripping out the key route system. So just keep that in mind, caveat emptor.
No, absolutely. And the permit terms and conditions are very stringent. They would apply to any company if Jump were ever to be bought, and the permits are revocable at any time by the SFMTA if we find reason.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Cohen?
Thank you. I'm going to ask that we move to public comment at this time. I have 2 public comment cards, but if there's any member of the public that'd like to speak and they have not filled out a card, please just come on up to the microphone. First, want to recognize Eileen Boken, and then second speaker will be Sam Dreamian. And if there's anyone else that'd like to speak, feel free to speak after Sam. Eileen, would you like to speak? Okay, whatever. Sam?
Good afternoon, supervisors. Thank you very much. My name is Sam Dryman, and I'm here on behalf of Lime Bike, based in San Mateo. We are the largest dockless bike sharing company in the United States. currently serving over 40 communities around the country, including Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Seattle, Dallas, and many communities around the Bay Area, such as Alameda, Walnut Creek, South San Francisco, and Burlingame. We are excited and prepared to serve the residents of San Francisco by providing a comprehensive, responsible, and truly dockless bike-sharing program. We've submitted several applications to the SFMTA for both regular pedal dockless bikes and electric assist pedal bikes, with the hope that we can immediately serve communities that do not have and will not have access to bike sharing in the near future. We meet the requirements the SFMTA has put forth, including providing proper insurance, testing certifications, and a willingness to share data, which we already do in the 40-plus communities in which we operate. We were also never notified of the electric bike requirement or preference for electric bikes, even after asking multiple times. As a local company, we understand the unique environment that is San Francisco and the challenges that lie ahead for dockless bike sharing. We are committed to hiring locally and enacting a robust outreach campaign that would work with the community. Our bikes and operations are changing the way people are moving around, where in just the last 6 months of 2017, we've supported over 500,000 users that have taken over 1 million trips, over 40% of which have started or ended at a mass transit point. This shows that Lime bikes are being used to solve first and last mile transportation challenges, and we're ready to help support San Francisco the same way. On behalf of Lime Bike, I urge you to reconsider the process and move forward with a permanent process.
When your mic cuts off, that means that your 2-minute allotment of time is up. Next speaker, please.
3 minutes, correct?
No, it's 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
There's a timer.
Then I'll be brief.
There's a timer in front of you.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Thank you, supervisors. My name is Matt Sheehan. I'm just an interested citizen. I'm 4th generation here in the Bay, and I also spent much of the last 5 years over in China as a journalist, and so I sort of watched the rise and fall there. And ever since I moved back here, I've been really interested in the proliferation of bike share here. While I was in China, I got to watch kind of 3 phases of dockless and docked bike share evolve. First, they had a Beijing city program that was a lot like Ford Go Bike. Stations, you move from here to there, then you got to lock it up there. And that program was fine. It was okay. You know, I used it probably 3 times in a year. But about 6 months after that, you saw the explosion of dockless bike share. And there was a period where it was the best thing that happened to Beijing transportation in the 5 years that I was there. It completely changed the way that you get around on public transportation. In short distances, it provided that kind of last mile resolution that made public transportation the choice rather than hailing a cab and just getting stuck in Beijing traffic. So personally, I've been a big fan of dockless bike sharing. And I've also seen the downside as it evolved. Over the last year, the streets there have been kind of flooded because a lot of money is rushed into that in China. And yeah, there has been like clutter and it's blocked up some sidewalks and stuff like that. I think on balance, it's still a great thing, but I think it's a very solvable problem through regulation, simply limiting the number of bikes. And so those 3 phases of docked bikes exclusively, an appropriate number of dockless bikes, and then an overabundance of dockless bikes. I kind of saw all 3 of those. And I think that the middle phase is the perfect one. Dockless bikes that really open up the city in a new way, but that are regulated in terms of number. I think the number that I've heard for the number of jump bikes is 250 for the city, which is just not nearly enough. You need to hit a certain saturation point where people walk out the door and they're confident that they're going to be able to get a bike and resolve their problems. So I really hope that the supervisors or the MTA will reconsider in a way to get enough bikes on the street to make it useful without overcrowding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi there. My name is Jeannie Orellana. I'm from Bay City Bike Rentals and Parkwide Bike Rentals. I'm here representing the San Francisco bike rental industry. In 2011, we were strategically omitted in the establishment of a city-condoned bike share program. All we were ever promised is that it was a transportation solution. Still, we have been consistently coming to the table to find a way to coexist with the Motivate program. When the city got into a contract with Motivate, it didn't anticipate its new sponsor would be Ford. When the city got into an 18-month agreement with Jump, it didn't anticipate its new owner would be Uber. It's time for you to create real protections for small businesses. You need to be mindful of the small business industries that already exist. before squashing them with your efforts to invite big technology in. The San Francisco bike rental industry, in business for over 30 years, doesn't want to be the next small grocer getting killed by Amazon Whole Foods, the next cab or transit system getting sidelined by the TNCs. With this conversation, you now have an opportunity to protect the locally owned bike rental industry. Like the laws for formula retail, you can now legislate this and find a way to control the disruption of a small business market. You can bring us all to the table, bike share and bike rental, and find a way for us to coexist fairly and, moreover, preserve diverse, locally owned small businesses in the process. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Jeff Sears, Blazing Saddles Bike Rental. The San Francisco bike rental industry is over 30 years old and is an essential component of the San Francisco tourism industry. For over 6 years, we have been told by the MTC, the MTA, and Livable Streets Department that the city condoned bike share program was created as a transportation solution. We wanted to coexist with a transit solution that, one, would not compete with our small businesses, and two, be a product distinctly different from bike rental, i.e. recreation. To demonstrate this distinction, a non-compete agreement was created between the Port of San Francisco and Ford Go Bike to protect the bike rental industry from being wiped out. Also note, the jump map already excludes Fisherman's Wharf, suggesting that they too recognize the distinction between recreation and long-term bike rental and transit-oriented short-term bike share. City-sponsored bike share cannot be a transportation solution if its market is cannibalized by stationless bike share. We are concerned it will force Ford Go Bike to pursue the tourism market even more aggressively than they already are. We in the bike rental industry have been meeting with Motivate, Supervisor Peskin and his staff, and the mayor's office in an attempt to ensure our small businesses will not be obliterated by the city-sponsored program. We feel bike share companies need to be regulated and follow controls similar to those that exist between the port and Ford Go Bike. Controls put in place to protect the long-term bike rental industry. All bike share companies need clear guidelines in order to not eliminate our locally owned and operated bike industry that provides jobs and pays taxes. We need your help to differentiate to the public the difference between transportation and a recreation product. Please continue helping us. Thank you.
My name is Rob Schwartz, and like Jeannie and Jeff before me, I'm with a local bike rental company, San Francisco Bicycle Rentals. I don't have real organized, prepared comments here, but one thing that occurs to me is that it might seem to those of us present here that I think this discussion was called because of a brewing conflict, right, between large actual billion-dollar companies such as OFO, Jump/Ford, and Jump/Uber and Ford, and introducing. So here we are, the small bike rental industry, and so I just want to sort of reiterate what the principle that Supervisor Cohen invoked, which was we're hoping that as we move forward here, that agreements that are already in place, such as between the Port of San Francisco and Ford. To protect, to honor a natural distinction, and this is what I want to really say, is that there's a natural distinction between the bike rental market and the bike share market, which Ford is doing its best to honor. We're meeting with them on a regular basis, trying to make sure that that's honored, and it's not always easygoing, but nonetheless, they're trying to honor it. And so we're hopeful that introducing ourselves to this discussion does not seem like, oh my goodness, how are we going to also, we're dealing with Uber, Ford, OFO. How are we going to handle the needs of the bike rental market? We're here to suggest that actually we think there's a natural distinction. Basically, it comes down to a long-term recreational transit option, such as bike rental, 2 hours plus, and 2 hours and under. And those are sort of basic principles. We're hoping that we're going to be invited to this table, and we're confident that a fair solution can be reached for everyone here. Thank you.
Eileen Bogan, President of Speak, here on my own behalf. On broader issues of coordination of MTA technical and implementation team, beyond bike share, I believe the core issues here are quality control and capacity. It is my understanding that plans go directly from the lead planner, this is the Muni Forward plans, to the MTA Engineering Committee without vetting or review by senior staff. This could have a significant impact on quality control. This could also be the root cause of MTA missteps. An example is that the MTA has reconfigured the area in front of Balboa Park BART station for the third time. I would urge the committee to conduct a hearing on quality control along with MTA checks and balances issues. On the issue of capacity, the chair of the MTA Bond Oversight Committee asked staff if there was adequate capacity to successfully manage the large number of capital projects that the agency is currently implementing concurrently. Although the response was yes, that could be questioned. For example, on Taravel, in preparation for clear zones, the MTA posted tow-away signs. However, they weren't prominently posted. People parked, and when their cars on Taravel, they came out, their cars had been towed. Although this could be seen as a minor issue, this could be an indication of major issues. I would urge the committee to conduct a hearing on MTA capacity issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public who wish to speak on this hearing item? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. All right, so this hearing has been held. Our sponsor of this hearing has departed the hearing, but I think that our main point is we just wanted to ensure that there was fairness and transparency in terms of the process in which the permits were issued around bike share, especially the dockless or semi-dockless bike sharing. I think that for me, I was very excited about the idea of the potential new types of bike sharing that would be rolled out in the city, especially because with the current contract that we have, the Sunset and the West Side districts would not have seen bike share for years and years and years on out. And I think that many of our residents would like to see bike sharing out there just the same as those who are on the eastern part of the town. So with all that said, I think we've gotten many questions answered here. However, I think that the conversation will absolutely still need to continue, obviously. But colleagues, do you have any other further questions or comments on this hearing item? No? Okay, so our Supervisor Cohen has requested that this hearing be filed. So can we get a motion to that effect? Okay, all right, so we'll do that without objection. This hearing is filed. Mr. Clerk, are there any other items before us?
That completes the agenda for today.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.